Why, hello there. Are you ready to start playing with the VAX again? So I think you'll remember last time around we were working on trying to just get into the machine at all because we have no keyboard, no mouse. We managed to get a monitor working last time. This time around we're kind of trying to shore things up with the input situation. Looking around online, I managed to find one project each for mouse emulation and keyboard emulation. So this time around, I'm basically trying to build some more real peripherals so that we can play with this thing more like it was intended to be played with. And to that end, let's just start the VO, because that's what this is going to be. That first Hackaday project I found was for the keyboard and was posted in 2017 for somebody named peterbjornx. And it's actually a pretty cool project that he was doing because he was in a somewhat similar situation to me, except I'm sure he didn't, boneheadedly break his VT keyboard, but he didn't have a VT keyboard and he had a terminal. So he wrote a library for using a PS2 device to emulate this LK201. This is actually the same reference I was using last time. You can see where I'm going through the key matrix to try and figure out why one of the keys isn't being sent properly. That ended up being a typo in the DEC manual. The other project for handling the mouse is by one Dave Kuder. I hope I'm getting that right, K-U-D-E-R. I'm so glad to the authors that these exist because I thought maybe I could get away without doing any code work on my own, and that almost ended up being the case. But my original thought was that I bought a bunch of AT Megas a while back just in a tube. And I was figuring I'd just program my whole thing myself. I may still go back to the raw AVRs. Mainly, maybe if I do a rework of this project, you'll see there's more work that I really need to do. And if I ever go back to restoring that LK201 that I blew up. There's obviously also the issue that these are Arduino projects and not just AVR projects. But, as it turns out, I just bought a Mini Pro, and I have a couple teensies that were both used up until this point. One I use for a keyboard adapter for turning my ADB keyboard that I use into USB. The other one I've been using to program EEPROMs for the old computer project. Well, like everyone else, I finally broke down and bought a Mini Pro, which is super, super cool. I love my Mini Pro, and I can't wait to get more usage out of it. But that means that the teensy that was being used for the EEPROM programming is now free. So that's the issue of the Arduino down. But there still remains the issue that the inputs on the VCB02 are full voltage RS-232. That's a swing of plus or minus 12 volts. Whereas the Arduino itself has a UART on it, but that UART only puts out TTL levels, so that is 5 volts to 0 volts. I had built another level conversion circuit for use with my Genesis for making another cable for talking to its serial port, but I didn't end up needing that. So I'm going to take that, pull off whatever we don't need, and use it for our voltage level conversion needs that we're going to need for this project. One of the last puzzle pieces here is actually being able to plug PS2 devices into this hardware. Unfortunately, the best I can do there sitting around is this old PS2 to USB adapter that I was using for my KVM setup to attach to my iMac. Haven't been using that, so I'm gonna sacrifice it. I can always get another one, but still, sad day on that one. So that's all the cobbled together bits and bobs. I guess the next step is just that I needed to sit down and solder each of these together. Whoa, I have bubble wrap on the floor. That was fun. Okay, so obviously I'm trying to make something useful out of what is basically a bunch of trash here. This guy is, I think, where I'll start. It's time to let it go. I'm going to see if I can desolder this. I do not have a desoldering gun. Someday I will make that purchase. But as of the moment, I don't. So this may be real finicky. We'll see where I get with it. And I might just ruin it entirely, in which case we'll go back to the using a raw AT Tiny plan. See how that goes. Well, that kind of turned out, kind of worked out. But let's see, after all that abuse, if this thing even still works. Well, would you look at that? I'm just gonna chop this up and slap some headers on the wires so that I can just shove them right into the teensy headers. All right, these babies are now effing around friendly. All right, so I think this is the last bit for prep. You know, I could just throw a Max 232 on a breadboard. That would be nice and easy, except that while I do have other Max 232s, I don't have the proper caps in. So we're gonna have to make do with putting some headers on this little guy. Okay, maybe that's something. It sure has a lot of pins on it. I think that's it. I think now I just gotta plug these things together and give them a little test-a-rooney. Huh. The soldering went off pretty much without a hitch. I was actually pretty pleasantly surprised that I was able to get the teensy out of that board and it seemed to be working totally fine. So, easiest breath of air on the whole project was that. So I wired up a quick test using the software serial and the hardware serial on the teensy and running them both through the Max 232 so that I can make sure that they could both send and receive properly and that everything was flowing through and getting voltage converted properly. Okay, I'm reverting to shaky cam for this one. Currently doing tests to make sure the Max 232 actually still works. Basically what I've got going on is this is that USB serial dongle that I use for freaking everything that is running through a couple of these to one of the inputs of the Max 232, the RS232, you know, plus minus 12 volt side. Here on the back side, you have the two flyovers coming to, these guys are the hardware serial port on the AVR, and these are Arduino software serial ports. Well, a Arduino software serial port. And I wrote a small Arduino program that just sets up both a hardware and a software serial, and then for each of them just sits in a loop, you know, echoing what comes in. The difference is, for hardware serial, I'm flipping the LED on the port F, and for software serial, I am capitalizing everything in the cheapest way possible. Seems to be working pretty good. So right now I'm plugged into software serial, and everything should be on, and if my camera wants to focus, yeah, so that's software serial, all caps, and I will just go ahead and try to do this one-handed, which, oh Lord, oh Jesus Christ, oh God in heaven, please, dear God, have mercy on my soul. Oh, it's in. Okay. And, yeah, so now, look at that. And that LED is blinking. So it looks like my Max 232 is working just fine, and the serial is working on the AVR, which is great. Okay, bye. Miracle of miracles, my little trash Max 232 circuit that I had just had sitting around was working absolutely fine. With the basic hardware ready to go, I decided it was time to just take the keyboard project in and itself, just throw it into the Arduino Studio, write it to the chip, and then make sure that was basically working. That way I could make sure the actual PS2 connector was wired in properly for starters, and ensure that the software was in a state where it was usable for me, which I pretty much assumed it was. I spent some time looking at pinouts and whatnot. I'm really thankful, just for playing around purposes, I put everything on pin headers, so now I can just use my little flyover wires to do everything and connect everything up. It's gonna be a rat's nest for now, but that is, you know, what it is. As long as it works. What I'm gonna do is I am going to start just doing the keyboard, because I can just throw the keyboard code in without changing almost anything and just make sure it works on its own and kind of sanity check that. Right now, I just have it hooked up to the laptop again, and let's sanity check that things still work the way they were. Whoops, let's see. Hey, cool. My next step is I have not yet looked at the pinouts to figure out in the code which pin on the teensy is the data and clock for the PS2. So we're gonna do that, and then I'll be back. So give me just a hot second. The tangle gets a bit messier. The keyboard is now plugged in. You can see I have the PS2 keyboard up here, this crappy Dell baby. The code is updated, as you saw, but I had to futz around for a bit because I had these, you can't really see, sorry. These are the PS2 clock and data line, and they were like shifted by a pin, and I couldn't figure out why. It didn't seem to be getting PS2 commands, but I think I'm square now, so I haven't tried this yet. I figured I'd save that for you guys. So let's give it a shot, I guess. Let's boot it and see if it does good stuff. I feel pretty confident. Keyboard init doesn't seem to be happening, or at least the VAX is showing that it couldn't initialize the keyboard. Interesting. Another test, now that I have enabled a couple of the serial debugging commands that the original author left in the code, it looks like a bunch of the stuff in my Python emulation script just isn't handled here, and that was all I was doing there, was just sending acknowledge packets back, because apparently that's just what you do. But his code wasn't expecting that. So let's give this another run then. Well, that's somewhat annoying. It looks like maybe I didn't understand the code properly, because this says that same 88 command that we would be expecting. We expect it in the original script. And maybe that's getting picked up as a proper command somewhere and not getting handled properly still. Who knows? Let's see. Seem to have finally figured at least this portion of it. There were a couple subroutines that actually handled those commands. What they're doing is they're setting the properties of the functional divisions of the keyboard. They're basically commands that set how the keys should act, and the keys are broken up into divisions on the LK keyboards. The issue here is that those functions were implemented in here, but they weren't sending acknowledgements back, which I assume is because whatever terminal this guy was writing this code for didn't require the acknowledgements to be sent back and just ignored them, whereas this machine does actually, it'll just fail if it doesn't get acknowledgements back in a certain time period. So, okay, power on. Cool. It still makes me happy, but I knew that was going to happen. Happened last time. Sorry, I fixed that off camera. Here we go. Moment of truth. Whoa, that's a B. I kind of want to zoom in, but I can't. Here's what I'll do. Give me a second. Okay, this kind of works. You should see how awkward this is on my side, but let's just do some typing. D, U, A, 1. Yay! Cool. Well, I will cut out all the footage here where this boots up, and I will meet you, presumably at the DECWindows login prompt. Give me a GUI. I command you to give me a GUI. Here she comes, here she comes. Typing in my name, it is system. Backspace? Oh, backspace works a treat. Capitals. Let's try caps lock. Oh, beautiful. Tab on over here. See if I can remember what my password is. Aha. Fuck. God damn it. God damn it. Oh, it shut down my session entirely because it detected a break-in. Okay, let me just reset my password and we'll move on to the mouse. I'm very sorry. New sunny day, or at least it was sunny before the sun decided to go behind the clouds. It was really gorgeous, I swear to God. Anyhow, I guess time to start on the mouse portion of this whole thing. So here's where the project starts getting a little bit gnarly. That keyboard went perfectly fine. I was very happy with that. And I figured the mouse will probably go just about as easy. I gave myself a full weekend day to get that done, just because I figured it would take more time to mash the code together. Oh, I was wrong. This is going to be kind of a cluster no matter what I do. This mouse code is interesting. I mean, the mouse code itself is fine. It's just that mashing them up. I figured they would work in somewhat the same way as far as how they handle PS2, but one uses somebody's PS2 library that uses blocking access to PS2, and then the other one uses a kind of handwritten ISR that gets PS2 key presses on the fly as they happen and puts them in a buffer. So we've got an ISR over in one place, we've got whatever that library is doing, I didn't even look into it in the other place, and then we just kind of have it jammed all together. So if this works first try, I am going to have my mind blown absolutely, but I highly doubt it. Which it doesn't, it did not at all. Okay, I just commented out all of the mouse stuff because it's getting called in the startup function and the loop function. So I've just removed that entirely just to see if the keyboard stuff works on its own right now. Okay, so keyboard stuff works if I comment out the mouse stuff, so that's good. It could just be screwing things up by existing and, doing all kinds of havoc, but it looks like just something that it's doing when it starts up or is in its loop is futzing things up. Actually, the other thing to try really quick is to comment out all the keyboard stuff and try and run the mouse stuff and see, if it's the conflict of the two or if it's just that the mouse stuff isn't working. All right, we'll see now if the mouse code does anything. God damn it, of course, since the keyboard is not doing its initialization stuff, the video card isn't starting up. Ah! Last video, I said check your power. I'm sitting here, I'm trying to figure out. I just put a bit of code in there to wait until a pin went low so that I could wait for start the startup sequence for the mouse and the initialization sequence when I wanted to, after the serial had actually connected to my machine. And it stops. It stops. And I go, why is it stopping? It's not even trying. How could the library for the PS2 stuff be that off? Clock. Data. Ground. Power. Always check your power! Something is screwy with this PS2 library that does not at all like the Teensy. So I think what I'm going to do is just sit here real quick. I'm going to turn the camera off. I might do a screen cap. I'm gonna go ahead and just rewrite the PS2 stuff to match the way the keyboard does it. And just like that, it is the end of the day already. I'm gonna try and wrap this bit up a little bit, but mainly I have been wrestling with a bunch of uninteresting things, which largely revolve around not realizing that I had my clock and data lines for the mouse plugged in the wrong way around for quite a while and trying to debug it in software. Classic. A lot of it was futzing around with software to get the two bits of software meshed together and then kind of futzing it and turning it back around and kind of getting basically back to where I already was. Lots of things that aren't very interesting, but I'm kind of stuck at the point where I can only do so much more. Let me get the computer turned on, and then I'm kind of at a loss. I am going to do some more debugging, and we'll see. I was hoping to start editing this tomorrow, but it looks like I don't even know because I can't get a resolution to this. Let me turn the machine on and then I'll show you what my current issue is and how I can't really figure out how to go from here. It sends the power on self-test, like that's sane. It sends the right value for that. If I don't send that back in time or, respond to it properly, the machine says there's an error. If I do send it back in time and it receives it properly, then it says there's no error and carries on. So that bit is clearly the transaction is working fine. Then the machine sends FF to me every time, which is not a command. I mean, it clearly means something, but I have no freaking clue. Even after a full day of working, I still didn't have the mouse working. I won't bore you with all the details of me trying to figure out how the mouse was not working properly. What it boils down to is the parity bit. One thing I hadn't noticed was in the mouse code, he was specifically setting up the mouse serial device to odd parity. That's a bit I had just ripped out because I figured it wasn't necessary and I hadn't noticed the odd parity setting in the code in the first place. I kind of just glanced over it and assumed that the parameters he was sending to it were 8 and 1. That said, at the time that I was killing all of my time on this, I still didn't realize that and decided to switch over to my old standby, pulling up Python and my old serial dongle to try and debug this. So I don't remember when it dawned on me, but it was when I was playing with the dongle that I realized maybe I should check my settings. And there it was. In the original code, it was 8 bytes, odd parity, 1 stop bit. So all I did was switch to the Python code to set up the serial port for an odd parity bit, and suddenly everything started working. I was sending and receiving manual bytes, and they all seem to be crystal clear. It was so good when I tested first getting that post code and then sending back my post data, and then immediately getting back the code that said, please go into report mode. So with that cracked, I decided, all right, this is going to work out perfectly. I just need to put odd parity onto the Arduino code. Well, that's where it turns out to be a bit of a bummer, because the software serial that is provided by the Arduino libraries doesn't support configuring any kind of parity or start and stop bits or any of that stuff whatsoever. The hardware serial on the Teensy also doesn't support odd parity. So for the mouse, that meant I had to move back to working on the laptop. I'd been playing with UI stuff on the Genesis, and so one thing that I had done was I was streaming mouse information over the serial port into the Genesis to move a sprite around on the screen based on mouse input. So I already had a little TK project sitting around that just spawned a window and pulled mouse events off of it and then sent them over the serial port. What I ended up doing was basically just taking that Arduino code and rewriting it in Python with a little bit of mashing code together, which, whew, this project was a whole bunch of trying to mash two disparate parts of code together. I finally had something working. Maybe not in the ideal way, but, well, here it goes. So, as you can see, we are back at that login dialog. Let's get this the hell out of here. And you'll see the keyboard is working real great. It's very nice to be able to actually just smoothly type on this thing instead of screwing with a Python script. But you will see also over here, I have my dongle-based mouse solution over Python working more or less. So if I click in this window, it will start transmitting the mouse commands over here, and we get pretty smooth mouse motion, all things considered. So I can click on this OK button, and it logs me in. How cool is that? I am very chuffed with this. So, you know, more or less where we were at the end of the last one, except that I can actually move the mouse around and click a window to move it and resize it. It's a little awkward doing this on camera, but it works, trust me. And then we can go session, quit, maybe, there we go. Yes, I would love to quit. Oh, like a dream. So that's where I'm gonna have to cut it short today. I know you guys have probably been kind of waiting to see how the UI looks and get a tour of this machine, but you know, this took me a lot longer than I was hoping to. I am shooting this voiceover portion on the day after I was hoping to post the video, and I've still got a lot of footage to edit down, so my advanced apologies that this might be out a little bit late. But that said, at the very least now we have mouse stuff working, so we can actually work in the UI, and I can do a little demo of the UI. So I won't leave you guys waiting much longer. Instead of next week doing more on the DIY video card project, which I will get back to, I'm gonna do another VCB02 video, hopefully something that is a little easier for me to make and a little more satisfying for you guys to see, and should be out in a little bit more of a timely manner, because I don't think there's much that can go wrong. I'll finally get around to putting in that extra memory board I have, which, you know, the only thing that could go wrong with that is that it just doesn't work at all, and then I have to pull it out. And I also still have that serial board that I haven't put in, so I'll try and maybe make a little serial adapter header for that, because it uses kind of card edge pin headers on the card to connect to what would be a bulkhead interface. But much with like the VCB02, I don't have that bulkhead. But it should be pretty easy to solder that up and get it put in. And then with those put in, I should finally be able to give you guys a little demo of this old school VMS 5.5 desktop. I'm really excited too. I've only played around with it a little bit to date, and I'm gonna have to do a little bit more to figure out what's worth showing you guys, because, you know, it's pretty bare bones, it really is. But for now, that's it. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. It amazes me. I'm up to almost like 300 subscribers, which, you know, it's not crazy in YouTube terms, but everybody seems really passionate about checking these out and the weird stuff I'm doing, and even having 300 people that care enough to even click the subscribe button and see what I'm doing from week to week just blows my mind. So thank you so much. It really makes it feel like, you know, I've got some buddies around that just kind of want to see what projects I'm up to and are taking an interest, and that means a lot. I don't know if that's coming across on the camera. My wife is watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and it's getting pretty gnarly. Well, anyway, I think that's about it. So next time, let's just pull up a cup of coffee and play with our machine at last instead of stressing over getting it working. Until then, thank you guys again so much for coming over, and see you. I hope you can see the hump of my back, because I really have no idea. And I'm not watching this. You know, I don't have a monitor, so this could look really stupid, but that's kind of my deal. Anyway, I'm just down here, hanging out, looking at the floor. It's a good floor. Needs sweeping.